Hello, friends. Here we are again. I'm going to continue with the adventure of The Tale of Despereaux. Let's go. Chapter 12, Adieu. The sound of the drum changed again. The final tap disappeared. It became nothing but boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Lester used only his tail, bringing it down with a great force and seriousness upon the drum. The threadmaster retreated. The room full of mice fell silent, expecting, waiting, and as Despereaux stood before them with the red thread around his neck, and the 14 members of the Mouse Council perched on the bricks above him, 2 burly mice came forward. Black pieces of cloth covered their heads. They were slits for eyes. "We," said the bigger of the 2 mice, "will escort you to the dungeon." "Despereaux!" Antoinette called out. "Oh, my Despereaux!" Despereaux looked into the crowd of mice and saw his mother. She was easy to spot. In honor of her youngest mouse being sent to the dungeon, she had put on a tremendous amount of makeup. Each of the hooded mice put a paw on Despereaux's shoulders. "It's time," the one said. Antoinette pushed her way through the crowd. "He's my son," she said. "I want to have a last word with my son." Despereaux looked at his mother. He concentrated on standing before her without trembling. He concentrated on not being such a disappointment. "Please," said Antoinette, "what will happen to him? What will happen to my baby?" "Ma'am," said the first hood in a deep and slow voice, "you don't want to know." "I want to know. I want to know. He is my child. The child of my heart. The last of my mouse babies." The hooded mouse said nothing. "Tell me," said Antoinette. "The rats," said the first. "The rats," said the second. Yes, we, the rats. What of them?" "The rats will eat him," said the second hood. "Mon Dieu," said Antoinette. At the thought of being eaten by rats, Despereaux forgot about being brave. He forgot about not being a disappointment. He felt himself heading into another faint. But his mother, who had an excellent sense of dramatic timing, beat him to it. She executed a beautiful, flawless swoon, landing right at the feet of Despereaux. "Now you done it," said the first hood. "It doesn't matter," said the second. "Step over her. We have a job to do. Nobody's mother's going to stop us. To the dungeon." "To the dungeon," repeated the first hood. But his voice, so deep and certain a moment ago, now shook a tiny bit. He put a paw on Despereaux and tugged him forward. And the 2 hoods and Despereaux stepped over Antoinette. The crowd parted. The mice began to chant, "To the dungeon, to the dungeon, to the dungeon." The drumbeat continued. Boom, 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 boom. And Despereaux was led away. At the last moment, Antoinette came out of a faint and shouted one word to her child. And that word, readers, was adieu. Do you know the definition of adieu? Don't bother with your dictionary, I will tell you. Adieu is a French word for farewell. Farewell is not the word you would like to hear from your mother as you are being led to the dungeon by 2 oversized mice in black hoods. Words that you would like to hear are, "Take me instead. I'll go to the dungeon in my son's place." There is a great deal of comfort in those words. But readers, there is no comfort in the word farewell, even if you say it in French. Farewell is a word that, in any language, is full of sorrow. It is a word that promises absolutely nothing. Chapter 13. Perfidy Unlimited. Together, the 3 mice traveled down, down, down. The thread around Despereaux's neck was tight. He felt as if it was choking him. He tugged at it with one paw. "Don't touch the thread," barked the second hood. "Yeah," echoed the first hood. "Don't touch the thread." They moved quickly, and whenever Despereaux slowed down, one of the two hoods poked him in the shoulder and told him to keep moving. They went through holes in the walls and down golden stairs. They went past rooms with doors that were closed and doors that were flung open wide. The three mice traveled across marble floors and under heavy velvet drapes. They moved through the warm patches of the sunlight and dark pools of shade. This, thought Despereaux, was the world he was leaving behind, the world that he knew and loved. And somewhere in it, the Princess P was laughing and smiling and clapping her hands to music, unaware of Despereaux's fate, that he would not be able to let the princess know what has become of him suddenly was unbearable to this mouse. "Oh, would it be possible to have a last word with the princess?" Despereaux asked. "A word?" asked the second hood. "You want a word with the human?" "I want to tell her what has happened to me." "Jeez," said the first hood. He stopped and stamped his paw on the floor in frustration. "Cripes! You can't learn, can you?" That voice was terribly familiar to Despereaux. "Furlong?" he said. "What?" said the first hood irritably. Despereaux shuddered. His own brother was delivering him to the dungeon? His heart stopped beating and he shrank into a small, cold, disbelieving pebble. But then, just as quickly, it leapt up again, beating with hope. "Furlong," said Despereaux, and he took one of his brother's paws in his own. "Please, please, let me go, please. I'm your brother." Furlong rolled his eyes. He took his paw out of Despereaux's hand. "No, no way." "Please," said Despereaux. "No, rules are rules," said Furlong. Now, readers, do you recall the word perfidy? As our story progresses, perfidy becomes an even more appropriate word, doesn't it? Perfidy was certainly the word that was in Despereaux's mind as the mice finally approached the narrow, steep steps that led to the black hole of the dungeon. They stood, the three mice, two with hoods and one without, and contemplated the abyss before them. Then Furlong stood up on his hind legs and placed his right paw over his heart. "For the good of the castle mice," he announced to the darkness, "we deliver to the dungeon this day a mouse in need of punishment. He is, according to the law we have established, wearing the red thread of death." "Red thread of death?" repeated Despereaux in a small voice. Wearing the red thread of death was a terrible phrase, but the mouse didn't have long to consider its implications because he was suddenly pushed from behind by the hooded mice. The push was a strong one, and it sent Despereaux flying down the stairs into the dungeon. As he tumbled whisker over tail through the darkness, there were only two words in his mind. One was perfidy, and the other word was pea, and he clung to it. Perfidy pea, perfidy pea, perfidy pea. These were the words that pinwheeled through Despereaux's mind as his body descended into the darkness. Here is Despereaux and the hooded mice. Chapter 14, Darkness. Despereaux laid on his back at the bottom of the steps and touched the bones in his body one by one. They were all there, and amazingly, they were unbroken. He got to his feet and became aware of the terrible, foul, extremely insulting smell. The dungeon, readers, stank. It stank of despair and suffering and hopelessness, which to say that the dungeon smelled of rats. It was so dark. Despereaux had never before encountered darkness so awful, so all-encompassing. The darkness had a physical presence, as if it was being all its own. The mouse held up one paw in front of his whiskers. He could not even see that. He had a truly alarming thought. He, Despereaux Tillings, did not even exist. "Oh my," he said out loud. His voice echoed in the smelly darkness. "Perfidy," Despereaux said, just to hear his voice again, to assure himself that he did actually exist. "P," he said. The name of his beloved was swallowed up by the darkness. He shivered, he shook, he sneezed. His teeth chattered. He longed for his handkerchief. He grabbed hold of his tail. It took him a long, frightening moment to even locate his tail. So absolutely was the darkness. To have something, anything, just to hold on to. He considered fainting. He deemed it the only reasonable response in the situation which he found himself in. But then he remembered the words of the threadmaster. Honor, courtesy, devotion, bravery. I will be brave, thought Despereaux. I will try to be brave like the knight in shining armor. I will be brave for the Princess P. How best for him to be brave? He cleared his throat, let go of his tail, stood up straighter. "Once upon a time," he said out loud to the darkness. He said these words because they were the best and most powerful words that he knew, and just the saying of them comforted him. "Once upon a time," he said again, feeling a tiny bit braver, "there was a knight, and he wore always a armor of shining silver." "Once upon a time," boomed a voice from the darkness, "a knight in shining armor? What does a mouse know of such things?" That voice was the loudest voice Despereaux had ever heard. Could only, he assumed, belong to the world's largest rat. Despereaux's small, overworked heart stopped beating, and for the second time that day, the mouse fainted. We will continue tomorrow.